Warning! This episode contains foul language and cases that involve child murder, adult murder, sexual and psychological abuse, cannibalism, and necrophilia.
Listening to Keep It Weird, the podcast for all things strange, spooky, icky, mysterious, terror-inducing, murdery, and everything in between. Each week we sit down together or with a very special guest and we talk about something weird. And this week, as another part of our October Halloween series, we are getting creepy and a bit true crimey and brainwashery. That's a word and I said it. Because we are going back to a topic we haven't gotten to cover in a long while, the dark story of cults. Horrific cult leaders, the crimes committed by their followers, and the very mysterious and strange beliefs and justifications for actions held by most of these groups. It is all so fascinating and quite creepy, and also sometimes quite tragic. So get comfy with your hot apple cider and try to touch something extra soft, because this is going to be a rough and bumpy ride. My name is Lauren, and joining us today is not Ashley. It's a bit of a surprise, a little bit of a change-up. Joining us for our cult discussion is none other than our very special guest and good friend who has brought us all things cults in the past. It is the love of our lives, TYLER SCHUELKE.
Woo! Oh, I loved that. Love of your lives. Okay. Yeah, I'm prepared now.
It's real. Hi, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me again. It's been a sec.
It has been a sec. I was actually trying to remember. We had you on a few times for the cult series, and then we did that really cool fashion episode during the pandemic.
I think the fashion was the last one, yeah. Because before that, actually, we did
crazy.
The Queen Mary, too. Where we went...
Oh, the investigation.
Oh, I will never
forget. That was so fun.
No, it was so fun. Oh,
the
running around
ab
like
workout.
at midnight on the Queen Mary ship. I know, the ab workout, for real.
The ab workout just from laughter, because everything that happened was hilarious, ridiculous, over the top, and scary.
I'm gonna need another one of those, actually, because it was such a good workout, and I've been having a lot of October candy.
I know. I've been eating everything in sight, so I'm gonna need to get fit on the Queen Mary, please.
Well, I thought I was doing well, so I wasn't eating any candy, but at the same time, my partner bought the candy corn pumpkins that I've just been shoveling in. So I'm thinking I'm doing fine, and then realizing I'm having the most amount of sugar I could possibly.
Ate an entire bag.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
I'm also happy to hear that you like the candy corn pumpkins, because I'm a big fan of them as well. And also, candy corn just in general is a very controversial candy. So
it really
I get excited
is.
When others like it.
It really is. Yeah, Nick, he doesn't like actual just candy corn. He likes the pumpkins. He says the candy corns are nothing. You get 2 bites and it's if that. He's you need
That's
more
true.
of the taste.
Yeah, you need that chunky pumpkin. Gotta get that.
There you go. Get the chunk.
I love that so much. What is your favorite Halloween candy? Speaking of, I want to chat with you about Halloween before we jump in, you know?
Yeah, 'tis the season. Well, wrong holiday, but yeah. Gosh, what is my favorite? I tend to go more on the fruity side than I do the savory side. I like gummies or Skittles or those types of things rather than say a Twix or a Snickers or a
right.
You know.
Nothing too decadent and intense.
Yeah, exactly.
Fruity. Yeah.
I feel it's because I can't stop eating it, so I just want things that are able to continuously go in my mouth, where if it's Snickers or it's oh god, I can't have another one, but I guess I'm gonna.
But I will. I have no self-control, so it goes in my gullet.
Right down the hatch. I do love sugar babies, though, minus the teeth sticking, those little sugar, they're butterscotch or something.
Yeah.
And they stick to everything.
Forever.
I know, I just had a flash of them in my head, and I was yeah, okay, I gotta
sugar
mention.
Babies.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. I feel like I go for fruity. I'm definitely like a Sour Patch girl, Sour Patch watermelon especially, but I don't know if you've had Sour Patch strawberry that has newly come out in like the last 2 years.
No.
It's divine. When I come over on Monday.
I mean, better than watermelon?
I don't know. I think watermelon's still the GOAT, but I'm gonna try and find strawberry.
I like the contemplation on your face.
I had to think about it. Like, that was a real tough question you just threw at me. Tyler and I are watching Halloween Ends with his partner Nick on Monday, so I'm going to bring you some of that strawberry candy when I come over.
Oh, hell yeah. We can watch it end together with our strawberry.
I know. My gosh, we watched the last one together last year, and I mean, listen, there's a lot of things that we can pick out and say were over the top and ridiculous, as I think everyone would agree, but we still had so much fun watching it, and our girl,
so much fun.
Kyle Richards from Real Housewives was on it, so we had to cheer for her.
Our girl, yeah, no spoilers, but we were very worried for her.
I know. And she might meet her end in this next one, but you know.
Who knows? You know, it better be great. That's all I'm asking for. Like, give her something good.
I know, for sure.
Yeah.
I love also, and we may have talked about this before on the show, but I love how much Nick has gotten you into horror movies.
Oh my gosh.
I know. Feel like I wanted to get you into horror movies for a long time, and I like showed you a couple of things, but you really weren't feeling it. Now Nick has gotten you like on the train.
But like, not even just not feeling it, like being in the back of the room, eyes covering, pillow in front of, like I could only hear it, which actually might have been worse because now you're only hearing the things that you're making up in your head. But I remember like Scream, which is pretty tame. I was like, no, Lauren, no.
No, I won't.
No, now I'm like, yes, please bring it on. Like we took a trip to Palo Alto for a wedding and The Ring was on the TV and I was like, well, we gotta watch this. Like The Ring is such a good one. And so then I was like,
it's
okay.
One of my faves.
Well, he was warning me though, because I was like, hey, I really want to watch the second one. And he's like, okay, we'll do it, but just okay. And I was like, okay, this sounds like it's not going to be great. But I was like, I'm going to give it my go. And it wasn't. It was so hard to watch.
I know.
Just because it was such a good, I mean, The Ring itself is so good that Ring 2 was like, man, what are we doing here?
I know. They missed the mark on that one, but I'm still so proud of you.
Thank you. See, and this is now I'm realizing, like, I know scary movies enough now that I can say one's bad.
Yes,
like before I wasn't confident enough, you know? But now I'm
like I haven't seen enough, I have no comparison.
Yeah, exactly. Now I'm like, yeah, I am already, I mean, I've seen some of the crazy ones, you know? Like The Strangers. Right. Oh god, that one was scary. I will say Insidious knocked me out. Like I remember sweating like on the couch, like I couldn't, and our couch like it's not fully up your back, so like anything could just come at you. I was not doing okay with that. So
you get the chills up your spine, like someone is about to tap me on the shoulder.
Yep.
Yeah. Gosh, I love it so much. Well, as much as I love this Halloween lovely chat, we actually have to get to the dark and horrific and tragic chat that we have ahead of us.
Yeah. All good words for that. All good words.
We are going to chat about cults, as we said before, and Tyler's kind of our resident cult guest who we have had on in the past. But we are going to talk about some cults that we somehow haven't covered yet on the show. They went a little more, not necessarily under the radar, but I just feel like there's not like a ton out there on them. And my first one that I am going to jump in with actually has a Halloween connection. So we're bringing it all together, ladies and gentlemen.
Here we go.
We are going to talk about the Hand of Death cult and the connection to Jane Doe that went mysterious for about 3 decades called the Orange Socks Girl.
The Orange Socks Girl.
I know.
Wait, why does that already sound... It's not familiar. These are obscure ones, but doesn't that sound like something? It already does.
I mean, that's the thing, is like she wasn't necessarily obscure. It was just found out years later that she could even have a connection to a cult, possibly. But, I mean, Orange Socks Girl is a murder that you may have heard of. She was a Jane Doe for like 37 years. It's crazy.
Okay.
So, Halloween, 1979. We're in Texas. The Williamson County Sheriff's Office found the body of a young woman face down in a culvert, and I can't lie, I had to look up what a culvert was.
I was gonna say, I
was like, is it a ditch?
We're starting off hard here.
Is it a ditch? Is it a hole? I didn't know what it was. So a culvert is a tunnel going under a road or a railroad for water drainage. It's like those big silver, like tubes that you see, those big tunnels that are like under a hillside that are like sewers, basically.
Oh.
Or they might be like under an overpass and they're shooting out and draining water, and like they're big enough for people to like fit in. Like I feel like kids will be like smoking in them after school or something spooky.
Okay.
Yes, so that's a culvert. I had to look it up.
Culvert.
Yes. So they find a woman face down in a culvert, and it's along Interstate 35, just north of Georgetown, Texas.
I just looked it up. It looks like any scary horror film, like the thing like It, or like any of those things where people go into. I get what you're talking about. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's already creepy that like a body is in there, and it's just like it's Halloween, like it's a lot. Halloween, 1979, man. So we're in Georgetown, Texas. They find this woman, and it is estimated that she died only hours before being discovered. So they followed the blood trail from this initial scene, and they were able to find out that she hadn't been killed here. She was dragged here and left because there was a literal trail of blood that they could follow, and, you know, like little clues leading back to this grassy area nearby. And then she was dragged, lifted over the guardrail, and thrown from the overpass where she landed in this culvert. So brutal, horrible. Like, this person was not caring about her in any way. She was completely nude except for a pair of orange socks, because it was Halloween. She was wearing her bright orange festive socks, and that is how she obtained this nickname. The police could never find an ID for her for years and years and years. Her body was battered from the fall and the abuse of the hands of her killer. Her neck was showing visible bruises from manual strangulation. Oof. It was clear she had experienced sexual assault, and there were significant amounts of blood found both at the murder scene and the body dump area. There were no personal belongings at the scene. The killer most likely took all of her clothes and anything else that she had on her. And the only items found nearby were 2 matchbooks. One was from a hotel in Henrietta, Oklahoma, which the police believed supported their theory that she may have been a hitchhiker or a drifter moving through Texas, which was pretty much the theory that they stuck with the whole time, was that she was going from hotel to hotel. So that was all they could find, like, for a long time.
So
they had 0 leads.
They think the matches were from her, not from the person who had possibly done this. The
person who did it possibly could have been a drifter as well, but they because nobody was missing this woman in the area and nobody was looking for her, they also assumed that she was a hitchhiker or a drifter, because they were sort of like, she's not from Texas, what is her story, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
So that was their theory about her. And around the time this body was found, there had been a string of other bodies turning up along that same interstate, and investigators believed it was the work of the same killer or killers. There was also a theory that 2 people were working together. And they believe the victims might have been connected in some way. Some things were similar, and, you know, it was all women and sexual assault, all of those things. However, even with all of these theories, still 0 leads. In 1982, 3 years later, the police finally did get a lead. It was a convicted killer named Henry Lee Lucas, and he confessed to killing the Orange Socks girl, along with many other people.
You gotta be wary of those 3 names.
I know.
Sorry,
right?
I was just gonna say, you gotta be wary of those 3 names. John Wayne Gacy. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, they like
That's another thing we've talked about on the podcast before, that so many of them have 3 names. And yeah, he was, to answer your question, I did write it down in my notes, he was called a serial killer because of how many women he admitted to killing. So they were saying serial killer. His name was Henry Lee Lucas, and if those 3 names sound familiar to any of you, it is because he was a decently famous killer. I hadn't heard of him, I'll be honest, but I mean, there's a decent amount of stuff of him online. He went around killing with his crime partner, Otis Toole, for many years. So Lucas, by the time 1982 rolls around, had already been convicted and thrown into prison for other murders that he had confessed to, but then out of nowhere he said, oh, that Orange Socks girl, that mystery girl that you guys have been talking about, that was me. And he said he had picked up the girl in Oklahoma where they had consensual sex, he said, but that was not indicated. It was very clear that, he had, after the fact, probably had sex with her corpse, which is horrible, and abused her. He said that her name was either Joni or Judy. And he said that they drove through Texas together. He asked for sex. She said no. She decided to get out of the car, but then that is when he killed her and raped her corpse, disposing of her body after that. And he even physically showed the officers how he maneuvered her body over the guardrail to get it to fall down into the culvert. So he had a very specific story, like every detail. So they believed him and thought, okay, I guess that sounds like you did this, you awful monster. So Lucas received capital punishment conviction for the killing of the Orange Socks girl, and he stood by his story until 2 years later in 1984 when he out of nowhere recanted and said, actually, I was just messing with you guys, and I just wanted to take credit for that brutality,
kidding.
blah, blah, blah.
What?
So
which is a move I have never understood, but also I don't understand the killing in the first place, so why?
I think
why?
that
You're
all
letting
the time.
someone else get off.
That happens so often where they do that and then it's like, oh, just kidding. I'm like, what? I don't understand it. I don't understand it. I don't understand
because it's also
the professions of these people.
And it's also interesting too because it's like, it's not like you can trust what's being said of someone who is being convicted of murder when there's like all this evidence against them. But at the same time, it's like you want to because you just want to find the reason for the victims or for the families or for you just want to know why.
You're trying to get that closure. Yeah.
And here he is just waffling back and forth.
I know. So yeah, I'll never understand it. And it's so upsetting that, they thought they had this closure on this case and were learning more. And then he said, no, but actually I didn't do it. But after this, his capital punishment death sentence was reduced to life imprisonment, which honestly, I have always thought that is a better punishment for serial killers to rot away in prison and not get the grace of death. But you know what? That's for another day to talk about.
That's for another day, but I will say that I'm pretty on the same page as you.
I could go on and on
similar.
about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, capital punishment. So I am actually happy that his sentence was quote unquote reduced to life imprisonment and that he rotted away in jail. So what is the cult connection here now that we've heard?
Well, no, I'm just curious. Actually, sorry, just really quick, just curious. Was he convicted of Orange Socks Girl? Do you know?
He wasn't because I know he's
okay. Recanted.
He recanted, and so then they kind of just went back to investigating and like questioning him more of like, okay, well then why did you admit to it and recant, blah, blah, blah. And I think that basically went on 4 years until he died in 2001. So that was pretty ridiculous. But most people think he did do it, and nobody knows the reason for then taking it back when he confessed to so many other crimes. But he was just a twisted man, so we'll never understand. But so the cult connection with Henry Lee Lucas and Orange Socks Girl. Henry Lee Lucas and his crime partner, Otis Toole, who I mentioned earlier, have both admitted to killing over 30 people. But they claim it all was to do with their secret satanic cult that they belonged to called the Hand of Death.
Oy.
It was a satanic cult that had trained Lucas and Toole to be killers, and Lucas said he was taken to the Florida Everglades by Otis Toole when they first became friends. And it was out, in the Everglades, in the middle of nowhere. You're kind of hidden in the swampland. So there's like this little camp set up. He goes there, and he and others were trained by the Hand of Death leaders. And they were taught skills in killing, in rape, car theft, drug trafficking, kidnapping, and all kinds of organized criminal activity. And all we know about leadership, this cult is so strange and mysterious, and no one even knows if it's real or, it is real due to some evidence that has been found throughout these cases, but also like not real in the sense of this was just kind of an excuse for the killing.
Right.
I don't know, but
Like it feels like
there's
more
actual
there's
Satan worship involved
going on, or if it was like an easier way of like explaining some of this. Is that what you're kind of saying?
Right.
Like if they're it was this.
How can we get away with our crime? I don't know if they're actually sitting and doing, if they're actually sitting and worshiping Satan and have these beliefs that they claim to have, or if they're just like, this is going to be our cop-out. But either way, they're an organized crime group. And so all we know about the leadership, all that is to say, is like the leaders are very mysterious. That's what's weird about it. But apparently there was a man named Don who organized everything. And when Lucas first arrived in Florida, his partner Otis had clearly already been there a while and was sort of showing him around and showing him the ropes. Introduced him to Don, And Lucas realized this was the guy he had to prove himself to. So Don introduced him. Fucking Don.
It's fucking Don.
This guy. He takes Lucas under his wing and says, okay, so we have this cult member who betrayed the group. He betrayed the satanic oath that we all have to take when we become a member, and he has just betrayed us as a whole. So, Henry Lee Lucas, if you can kill this man for us, this betrayer, then you will be officially welcomed as a member of the Hand of Death cult. And so Lucas walks out to, like, this swampy area with the guy, and I guess the guy has no idea anything is happening. He's, like, drinking a beer, smoking a cigarette, chatting it up with this guy, and then when the guy leans back to take a drink of his beer, Lucas comes up behind him and slits his throat with a knife.
Oh.
And Don was so impressed by the clean kill that Lucas so easily did, because he had already kind of come from a life of crime, that he said, okay, you're going to be one of us, welcome in. So
I wonder
Lucas
if that,
joined...
like, I mean, would that be, like, that wouldn't have been his first kill, right?
I don't think so. It's, again, so much of the stories that Henry Lee Lucas told the police, they had to end up saying, well, we can't take them all seriously, because then he recanted some of them. But from what he said, this was either his second or third kill, because the reason he and Otis Toole, this other guy, met was because they were both in the crime world, and, like, they were doing some theft. There was some, like, killing.
You make it sound like there's, like, a criminal's Tinder, and they're,
I know,
like, going on and, like, oh no, this guy's not hard enough, swipe the right way. Like, yeah, exactly. Right? Like, your profile, yes. I'm actually BTK, I'm into, like, you know what I mean? Like, terrible.
I'm into petty theft, carjackings, and
looking to explore more.
Exactly. I mean, that's what he makes it sound like. Like, he basically met Otis Toole on the streets when they were both, like, robbing people, and I think they had to kill someone, like, in a scuffle during one of their robberies. So I think this was the first time where it was just like, I am going to murder this person. The other ones, maybe it was just more of a, like, in the moment crime. So, but he did it in such a smooth way that it was like, okay, well, you have this, you are made from evil, and you had this in your soul, so here you go. So, he killed this man.
So here you go.
So here he is. He was officially welcomed as a member of the Hand of Death group, and he told police later in interviews that he started in the kidnapping sect of the cult. Apparently there's different sects and, like,
different departments
of it. Yes, different departments.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it just, like, it just feels like it's like, like, who are you? And he's like, oh, I'm new. I just transferred from kidnapping, but I've been upgraded, like, or promoted to murdering. like what? Like, let's just circle back to that. It's just I'm thinking business.
Right now, I'm admin for the bank robberies section, but I'm hoping to be a supervisor by next month.
It's what his email signature
employee
says.
Of the month.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. And I was like, I was reading this over and over, like, this can't be real, but he claimed that it was a nationwide thing. So that's why there were so many different groups, because it's like there are people all around the country, all connected, doing these crimes and, you know, just kind of like checking in with each other and like, oh, these people are going to grab somebody from over here and then we have to get the money from over here. It was all connected and all just horrific. So,
well, it sounds like, they could have been other things. I mean, there's so many, like, little, like, small off cults that they could have been, like, a sect of the Hand of God, or Hand of Death, but
Hand of Death, totally.
Yeah. So,
yeah,
because
it's like, he's in Florida, you know, he's in the Everglades doing this, but apparently Charles Manson was also said to have been connected with Hand of Death and a Satan worshiper, so it's like, okay, they were over in California as well, you know, like, anyone who was performing evil acts claimed to be connected to this place pretty much. So Henry Lee Lucas, he starts in kidnapping, as he told police, and he was in charge of kidnapping children and teenagers and bringing them across the border into Mexico. He said because the cult was part of a nationwide ring, everyone was kind of working together and bringing people across the border into Mexico to be even more hidden and isolated, and they were taking these people to a ranch in Juarez, Mexico specifically, where it was already so dangerous to be there, and it was sort of like, oh, we can get away with anything over here. So it's okay, this is where it gets really awful, just a warning. At the ranch, I mean, it already has been awful, but really bad. At the ranch in Mexico, they would carry out ritual sacrifices, and it is rumored that there was possibly child pornography being made with some of the teenagers. Which is just so disgusting. I'm sorry to even say it, but I just want everyone to know how evil this was. I mean, obviously kidnapping and murder is bad enough, but I think we hear about that so often in the news and in true crime documentaries that we become a little numb to it. Yeah. But they were taking children and not only, abusing them, hurting them, eventually killing them, but making them perform sexual acts at an age where they didn't even understand what was happening.
Right.
I think it was mostly with teenagers, but there is a chance that possibly some of the children were even younger. And I know they definitely kidnapped, maybe did not do any sexual acts with, but kidnapped very young toddlers to bring over for some of these ritual sacrifices because they needed the blood of a very young child for whatever their beliefs were. It's so horrible. So I'm sorry I had to say all that, but that is how evil Hand of Death cult was.
It also shows you, though, the level of, like, and I'm not trying to say, like, certain acts, whatever, but, like, with cults, there's certain things that seem off limits. Like, even in this sense of, like, in prison, it's like they kill anyone that's done something to children. So it's like you've moved into a completely different territory now. Not because the things, like you said, were not bad before, but now you've upped the ante in the sense of, like, you're evil.
Yes. So evil.
I also had goosebumps from it. Like it got it's like, can you see? Like it's just it's so
it makes your hair stand up. It's so it makes me feel sick to my stomach. And I especially since I've become a mom, and Ashley and I talk about this sometimes, it's so much harder for me to talk about anything that involves kids now being hurt. So this, even as I was typing it out earlier, I just had such a pit in my stomach about it. But I thought it was important to just briefly mention to show like how far these people went and how terrible it was. So
truly. And also, I don't know that it's not going to be mentioned in my section either. So
yeah, well, I know it's what happens when we do true crime and especially cults. Yeah. Yes. So after a couple of years of kidnapping, Henry Lee Lucas did ask if he could move up into a team of killing, because he said as much as he knew he was doing a good job of the kidnapping and bringing people across the border, he knew his talent was in taking another person's life. He knew what he was. He was very self-aware. He was like, I'm evil. I'm good at this. I recognize it. And like, hail Satan, let me kill some people out there. So that is when he and his crime partner from before, Otis Toole, got to partner together once again and Toole really went crazy. They blamed it all on their worship to Satan once again and their cult leaders, asking them to do it and giving them missions. But again, they admitted to killing 30 people, and possibly there were more that, weren't even recorded.
30 people. Yeah.
Which is already nuts. That is nuts. And again, the Hand of Death has connections to killers such as Son of Sam and Charles Manson. No one knows anything about it other than its connection to serial killers and horrible cult leaders. And I am terrified by that because I wonder, what if these people are still around? I need more info, but it really is hard to dig stuff up on them. And we don't have serial killers really anymore because of all of the advancements in science. Nobody can get away with anything anymore. So I feel like we don't have that. But I do worry that there's like an underground Hand of Death still around, and that terrifies me to my core.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I would take it out as a possibility for sure. Like that, there's, and also you have to think about any children that were born into a cult. If they were, brought up that way, they could continue on.
Right.
Yeah, you don't know.
I know. You have no idea like what people have been trained to do when they were born into it and didn't have a choice, and it's so scary. That was basically all I wanted to say on the cult, but speaking of like talking about something nice, we did finally get an identification for Orange Socks Girl, so I wanted to wrap up with that and put those scum of the earth cult folks to the side for a moment. So
I don't know if you heard that I spit. I went, that's not very good.
Spit on him.
That was the daintiest spit probably ever sounding. Okay.
So whether Henry Lee Lucas killed the girl in the orange socks or not, she still hadn't been identified for a very long time. So it happened in 1979. And then over the years, police began to pick up leads here and there, but they all got proved wrong. Like in 2001, a photo was found that seemed to match the composite photo. Is that what you call it? Did I make that word up? Yeah.
I feel like composite photos, right? Yeah.
Composite. Yeah. Composite.
The
it
sketch
came out of my mouth, and then I was like, "Is that a word?" You know, when it's like it's a common word, but it still sounds wrong. Anyway,
but it sounds well because I've had that several times where I finished with an N instead of an M, or vice versa, and I'm like, "Oh, I've been saying it wrong my entire life."
Oh, that was incorrect.
Great.
Yes. So it seemed to match. I'm just going to say the photo that police had made that they had created for the unidentified girl. But through DNA, they were able to confirm that it was not her. And then a missing person named Martha Morrison was thought to have been the Orange Socks girl for a while, but DNA also disproved that. So every time something hopeful happened and it got, the community riled up and investigators excited, like every tiny victory would then be shot down, and they just kept coming up short. So it wasn't until the 37th anniversary in death for the break to happen. It was almost like to the date. It was in October, getting really close to Halloween again. It was then that the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children created new reconstruction photos of the girl in the orange socks and kind of trying to put together what would she look like today if she were still alive.
Ah, okay.
And then along with that, which there were some pretty impressive photos put together, more DNA testing was starting to be done on the socks that she had been found wearing, and it showed that 2 or more males were involved. Again, going along with their theory of possibly more people going involved.
Yeah.
But for some reason, no further testing has been done in trying to link the DNA to anyone. I don't know why, if it just got put on the back burner, whatever it may be, but they do know 2 separate males' DNA were on her socks, and new DNA testing was able to find DNA under her fingernails and on her body. So these were still big advancements and big breaks in the case. And then in 2019, they finally had an answer to the mystery of the girl in the orange socks when her sister saw
2019.
Isn't that crazy?
What?
Crazy.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, sorry. I interrupted that because that was crazy. Okay, yeah.
I know. So yeah, it was like the breaks in the case started coming at the 37th anniversary, and then in 2019 that would be officially the 40th, right? From 1979.
Yeah, I just did it. Yeah.
I saw you making
Did you see me with my
there.
fingers?
He was doing some math.
On my fingers.
2019 would finally bring an answer to the mystery of the girl in the orange socks when her sister saw a forensic picture that looked familiar. So with help from the DNA Doe Project and the sisters' DNA, they were able to find that orange socks girl was Deborah Louise Jackson. And we mentioned this on another episode recently. The DNA Doe Project is so cool. It's a group of volunteers that just want to help get DNA testing done faster. And so these people are just working day and night to get DNA figured out and test the correct people and do interviews with family members and track down lineage and go on these genealogy searches. They are so cool. And Ashley and I talked about them on a recent episode. And I was like, I love these people because, again, this stuff gets put on the back burner all the time. And why are her socks not being tested for these males' DNA? Anyway.
It feels like a little group of Michelle McNamara's, figuring it out, doing any means to get the DNA and figure this, solve this crime.
Give the families some closure. Yeah. So, Deborah Louise Jackson was the girl. Deborah was last seen around 1977, but her family never reported her missing because she, I guess, tended to go missing and was kind of a drifter and kind of out and about a lot. So she had been working at motels throughout the Midwest before she disappeared. So
makes
those
sense for the matches.
Matchbox, yep.
Yeah.
She had kind of been hopping from hotel to hotel. So when she was murdered in 1979, it didn't necessarily make waves with her family since they had thought of her as missing already. And that's why no one was coming forward where is she?
God, that's heartbreaking though already for a family.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Just this poor girl, already, it didn't sound had the best family life, was kind of just trying to make life work in whatever way she could, and then, came to this horrible end. It just, all of it makes me sad, but
Yeah.
So, but however, the sister saw the picture and, like right away wanted to do something about it. So I liked that she came forward and was like, oh my gosh, is this my sister after all of these years? And Deborah's family now does have this closure, and we can finally honor her with a name instead of calling her Orange Socks Girl after 40 years. Deborah Louise Jackson was found. And as I mentioned before, Henry Lee Lucas died in 2001, and no one really dug any deeper into the satanic cult or sex rings or his allegations because they sort of just wanted it to all die off with him and Otis Toole and Charles Manson and everybody who is claimed to have been a part of this cult. But again...
Which I get. I get it.
I do totally understand that.
I get
there
it.
is that part of me that, like, wants to know if they're still around. Like, there's just so much mystery surrounding them. I do still have questions. And could they be responsible for more crimes in the world that have never been solved? Or, are they responsible for anything crazy that happens here today that we can't explain? We may never know, but hand of death.
JonBenet Ramsey, Madeleine McCann.
Let's just blame them for that, honestly.
For all of them.
I know. Every mystery we can't solve.
The stories that I want the most answers from.
I know. That we will never get now. So, it upsets me. I can't even think about it.
I know because I'm that person, like most of us, that I just want to know why. I just want to know why.
No.
Like why it had to happen. Why you had to do this. I just want that.
I know.
But, yeah. I mean, great, though, that there was closure for Deborah and her family.
Yes. I'm happy that could come to a close for the family, especially, and, like, her sister getting to have that moment. But then also for the investigators who were so exhausted and just thought, like, this is never going to come to an end. And having to see that horrific scene that they saw with her and her bright orange socks. It's just so sad. But,
and we've seen, and I know listeners have seen enough of these types of, documentaries or true crime things where you realize, like, the person or, like, the head, detective or whatever, that haunts them for, like, their life. Like, they want to solve it. They want to. So, yeah, you're right. Like, saying closure for the investigators as well is a big, is a big one.
Who are you going to tell us about today with your cult chat, Mr. Tyler?
I know. So I was attracted to this cult. Well, that's terrible wording. But the reason why I was interested or intrigued was because I've only ever known about cults within the U.S. Like, I know that, and the UK, actually. But, like, I know that they've obviously are everywhere. But I haven't researched or looked into cults in another area of the world. And so this one was really interesting to me. I also was, like, at first I thought, like, oh, well, this is interesting because it was happening in the early aughts. And so I was like, most of the stuff is happening, in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, which was like the golden age of cults. But then if you really think about it, there are still a lot of cults around. We got, FLDS, whatever Caravallo was a part of, the Remnant Fellowship with Gwen Shamblin, now taken over by her daughter and son. Like, so there are still a lot. By the way, they're doing an HBO show of Gwen Shamblin.
Really?
And so I thought Parker Posey would have been the perfect person to play her with that huge hair and everything.
Ooh,
and I was like, just like, yeah, right? It's going to be Sarah Paulson, which obviously she's going to deliver.
No surprise.
Right, exactly.
Exactly.
If
anything is, like, terrible in the world, like, Sarah Paulson will play the character.
And authentically and give, like, the performance of her life. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm not even mad about it. Sarah Paulson can do it.
No. Not mad at all. Yeah, I know, exactly. So, that's coming to HBO at some point.
Interesting.
But, and then I realized there are more, still cults going on still. But this one, like I said, was in the early aughts. It doesn't have an official name, but it was, kind of coined the cult of Black Jesus. Only because of their leader.
Just like, what? what are you about to say with Black Jesus? I'm here for it.
Oh, it's coming. So, like I said, it's not their official name. Technically, I don't believe they had a name, which is something that cult leaders will do in order to stay almost under the radar. Like, if you can't identify it, then you can't actually be caught. However, it got its name, or it was referred to as this, because the leader had given himself that moniker. So, his name was Stephen Tari. I believe that's how you pronounce his last name. And he is from Papua New Guinea, and he is a self-proclaimed Black Jesus. He had been going to college to be a Lutheran minister, and he ended up prematurely dropping out after he rejected the teachings of the Bible. So first red flag there.
There you go.
For all of our cult leaders, we understand that's a kind of like step one.
That is just like everyone has to immediately reject whatever they're being taught, whatever the Bible says, and just start their own religion. That is
exactly right, which is ironic because it normally borrows so much then from like Christianity or from the Bible,
steals
right?
every word and just rebrands it as their own for sure.
Exactly.
But yeah, you have to be like a dropout first.
in another life, I feel like any cult leader would be great at marketing.
1,000%. Yeah, man. Yeah, that's
terrible.
how they get everybody. A wonderful marketing team. Yeah.
Which is crazy because he actually managed over the course of his run to amass a following of around 6,000 people.
Holy buckets.
In Papua New Guinea. And he was really notorious for having these flower girls, which were his concubines. They acted as his concubines. But the big ticket was they were often, if not all the time, underage. And their uniforms were extremely scantily clad.
Oof.
So that started to garner some attention. He had promised his followers salvation, immortality. We've all heard those ones, that they would be blessed by him, and received, great gifts of material goods and wealth as rewards for participating in the group, assisting in his rituals, those types of things. And even before, anything came out about the cult's inner workings or the horrific stuff I'm going to get into, the Lutheran Church, which is very prominent in Papua New Guinea, they declared Stephen Tari, the leader, an enemy of the church. So there was already some notice going on. It was predominantly from these flower girls. And I want to put quotations. You can't see it, but flower girl. Like,
I keep forgetting no one can see us but us. But
I know,
Tyler was doing air quotes.
This whole time. Yeah. So and also something to realize is that in 2005, there was already an investigation starting from the Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary, which I was like, Constabulary?
Constabulary?
Like a constable, but plural. Sure. Which is basically
all
the police.
All them constables.
There you go, all the constables. It was, it's basically like, I like that. I actually like that way more than trying to sound out this word. But it was police that had the jurisdiction of the entire country. And so they started to investigate him. There's not a lot of information on that investigation. It just, from my understanding, seems like he was put on their radar. So, like, I don't know that he was necessarily getting, looked into or whatnot, but he was getting notoriety most likely because of the flower girls. What he was actually doing, and this is where it gets graphic, was he was raping underage women, performing rituals, both sacrificial and not, but with murder being the most frequent outcome for all these young women. And he was apparently also participating in acts of cannibalism.
Oh, gosh.
So horrific, right? And it's so interesting because we both ended up picking cults that were sacrificial, which is not a huge thing with cults, but it is a certain sect.
Totally.
So
I was going to say, I feel like usually when we've talked about cults on this show, I haven't covered any that did any sacrifices. I feel like they were honestly more low-key cults that like were more just annoying than anything, like having absurd loud voices. But yeah, the sacrifices, that is next level.
Well, because it's also like, like there are different, and I think there are like 3 classical like types of cults. And, one of them is the more of the brain, emotional, getting intellectual and getting you damaged that way. And then there's just like there's one that's just like full out, like, we're just gonna, this.
Yep. We're going to do a ritual sacrifice, and you might have to give your own life too. I mean, we've heard about the ones where, the mass suicide, where it's just like, man, I can't believe you're that far in that you think that's the answer.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, I don't want to say there's some foreshadowing there, but, so basically, so the first accusation, the first murder, and rape accusation, came against him. It involved a girl named Rita Herman, who she joined the cult at the age of 13 to be one of his personal flower girls. But the reason being was her mother was reportedly the queen of the flower girls. And one of the things about this cult is that he used members, their family. They would bring in their members of their family because they were told, if you do this, you'll get this wealth, or if you do this, things will happen to you. Like, so they would bring in active members. They would bring in daughters. They'd bring in nieces. They'd bring in sisters. to it, thinking that things were okay, but they would make these women like, or tell these women like submit, like you, by not submitting, like you're making it worse, essentially.
Oh no, just sort of like obey and like, oh man.
Exactly. So her mother took her when she was 14 years old, so only a year later, to a private tent where she was then raped and killed by Tari with multiple stab wounds. Also, her sister had been arrested the following year as a flower girl, and like in my head, it's just like, if she had just been arrested too, like different, you know, like sliding doors, she would be okay. But her sister was arrested too. They intensely interviewed the mom. The mom has denied any wrong. Like, she basically said, like, I wasn't a part of it. I didn't do anything. I wasn't there. But multiple people have said that's not the case.
Yeah. Witnesses were there, honey. Jeez.
Yeah. So, so Tari was initially captured then in 2005 because of this allegation. Okay. But he escaped prior to his trial with the help of a Lutheran pastor. His name was Logan Sappas, who was assigned to... He was assigned to counsel him on what was going on and ended up joining the cult.
Stop.
Nope. He joined the cult instead, helped him escape. So now back in hiding, Tari was able to cultivate an honor guard. He recruited new members of flower girls from neighboring remote villages, promising them blessings of wealth in exchange for, in his rituals. And he enlisted only virgins, and it's reportedly some as young as 8 years old. Ooh. Now, it's unclear if this started after the escape, like he like upped his ante almost after, or if this was going on all along. They're not quite sure, but it was more prominent after his 2005 escape.
Oh my gosh. So he just like really was going for it after the escape.
Yes. It was bad. In June 2006, about 50 of Tari's followers, including about 30 of his flower girls, were rounded up in an operation by the police, and those follows publicly renounced Tari and reconciled with their respective churches. So on a public stage, at least these people were saying, this is bad, we understand, and they went back to what they were believing before.
Okay, well...
I know. I kind of... okay.
I'm like, good, but also... what? But you're still, I don't know.
It's like you can't be absolved of everything, but at the same time, if you're making, I don't know.
Right.
It's a very philosophical discussion.
Like, okay,
yeah.
Way to make a public statement saying we don't agree with this, but also, I wish you would also kind of take accountability for the other things, but
especially because you helped enact these horrible things.
Yeah.
So, in 2007. Villagers from a rival village of, and I might pronounce this wrong, but Matpi, that's where he was staying. That's where he was located after he had escaped. They entered the village and they attacked him and captured him. It was just a group of villagers. In fact, and it was so rural that apparently a villager climbed a tree to the top of the tree to get cell service to then call the authorities to then come and get him.
Like, he had to be at the top of the tree because there was no other service. Way. You're just in the middle of nowhere. And that was how he...
Exactly. And so
this is like a group of vigilantes, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
they were done with it. They were done with it, and they had known that he had escaped, and so they're like, no. And so, so they did wreck him up a bit, which I'm like, I won't say anything on that. They wrecked him up a bit. His trial was delayed because of his injuries, but when it finally happened... he was only charged with sexual offenses. The murder was never brought up on any platform. Never brought up, and they could not prove the cannibalism, so that was never brought up as well. He was only charged with sexual offenses. I guess while they were still trying to figure all that out when he was in custody, he tried to escape again, but was caught. And so finally, in October of 2010, he was found guilty of 4 counts of rape and sentenced to only 20 years in prison.
Okay.
Well,
that's not enough.
No, especially because
sure is a sad sentence when he deserved so much more. Okay.
I mean, rich sacrificial rituals, and brainwash. and on
murderer,
younger age
a
women.
rapist. Like, come on. Yeah,
Insane
a
amounts.
pedophile.
But
The list goes on and on.
The list goes on and on. 20 years in prison for four counts. Only 4.
It also sucks that I'm not surprised. Like, I'm horrified and I'm saddened, but I'm also not surprised. Like, we hear this all the time. People not getting the sentence they deserve, getting away with everything. So I'm also just like, well, yep, there's another
And it's also hard, too, when you start to go outside of the U.S. because we don't understand the laws, of the court in other places. So there could be, we could be like, oh, this is awful, but then, like, maybe this is a really good, sentencing for that over there. Like, we don't know. But, like, to me, I'm like,
it's
20 years? Are you kidding me? Like, no.
Right. Yeah.
Well, Tari didn't like being in prison, so on March 21st, 2013, he managed to escape.
This little escape artist.
I know.
What a scamp.
But guess what? And I want to learn more about this. He escaped in a mass breakout from the prison camp where around 48 other inmates also escaped.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was a big deal. Big deal. And that was in 2013.
Wow.
Yeah,
dang.
Right?
Yeah, that actually is more recent than I would think for a mass breakout. I'm like, that can't happen anymore.
Right, exactly. Wow. And then there it is.
And then
so 5 months later, he was on the verge of flying from Papua New Guinea to Israel. What was interesting was it's nearly an 8,000-mile trip, and he was trying to do it by helicopter, but we also know that he's a little bit crazy, so...
Yeah.
He's off his rocker.
He thinks he can do anything, this guy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are you an Avenger? Like, what?
I know. Yeah, what do you think? You're Iron Man? So, he had this cult follower named Mergen Wiggum, who reportedly was... I know, right? She was reportedly a scout for young girls and virgins, and she would bring them to Tari. That was her role within this cult. And, like I said earlier, a lot of people would offer up their young relatives, always female. Ugh, and so that's sad. What happened in the case of Rose Wiggum, who was her niece. He performed basically a sacrificial ritualistic murder on the 15-year-old girl, and then the following day attempted to murder a 14-year-old girl in one of the remote villages in eastern Papua New Guinea. Basically where Tari had been hiding out, since escaping prison. Also, just a side note, Rose's father was also arrested alongside the aunt, as in basically being a follower. So it feels like Rose, no matter what she was going to do, these people were not going to let her out, which is super tragic in my mind.
Oh, man.
So at this point, and I love this. At this point, the people in the surrounding villages had had enough, and around 80 men formed 3 different groups to target and take down Stephen Tari and also one of his followers, Matthias Ogumba. Now, the thing that's strange about this, and this is another topic that we could get into, some other time, but he was 15 years old, this boy. Oh. That was one of his followers, but he'd also actively participated in all of these things. Oh. So I think there was a little bit of we have to take him down as well.
Yeah, so, this feels wrong in a way because he's so young, but also he was a part of this. And at 15, it's so tough because, yes, you're not fully developed as a person, but you know enough to kind of make these choices. And
on
you
the flip side of it, at the flip side of it, they were sacrificing and raping 15, 14 earlier than that. Yeah. So it's a discussion for sure.
Right. Oh, man.
But on August 29th, 2013, one of the groups went after Tari himself in the morning while he was doing his ritual oblations, and he fled, running into the second group, which the second group ended up killing him, while the third group killed the accomplice, Matisse. So it wasn't until after he was dug up from his very shallow grave that the men, the men had dragged him into this grave with cane ropes around his neck, that the nature of his injuries were discovered and medically examined. It looked like he had been chopped and slashed with large bush knives on his arms, legs, chest, and stomach to where his intestines were coming out. And he was also castrated.
Whoa.
And he
no
was left
mercy.
there. no mercy. And there was an investigation that was opened up to follow kind of what had happened. I couldn't find any information on that investigation. It sounds like it just kind of disappeared with the wind, as if they were like, you know what, you took care of him, you did what you had to do, and it's gone.
And there it is, gone with the wind.
Right, yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of hoping you would say that. And that, that is something that I always feel bad for saying on this podcast, because I feel like there are so many times I really feel like that I'm on the same side as the vigilantes. I know that murder is never right. Like, it is never the answer to take another one's life, regardless, unless, I mean, a complete act of self-defense when you're being attacked.
An actual act of it, yeah.
Right, but we hear so many stories like this where it's like, you took this evil force from the world, and it's hard for me to be super upset. And I feel like the authorities were agreeing with that. Yeah,
and it's especially because it was. I know it still feels so weird to like support this or like try to like defend, but it's like it was a group of over 80 men who were trying to protect their villages. They'd seen their daughters, they'd seen their nieces, they'd seen their
men
wives,
were standing up for the women, which is beautiful.
Yeah,
also.
And so I thought that was something of note. And a community being like, we are tired of this, and we understand how we're going to stop it, and we have to, because again, if you think about it, you know, probably some of these men were a part of the original capture group. Right. You know, if you think about it, because it all happened around the same areas. So.
And they were like, okay, the first time we called the authorities and thought that was enough, and this guy keeps escaping and wiggling his way out, so we just have to end it. Like, it seems like this guy just would never stop, so.
Yeah, and so they took matters into their own hands, and it seemed like the police agreed with it. And so, but also to think, like, 2013 is just so close to where we are now.
I know.
And it's a wonder that we didn't hear more about it.
Yeah, I had no idea. This happens all the time. I mean, even when I was doing research for this episode, like, it was hard to even just pick one cult to focus on. I obviously ended up picking a story that talked about Halloween, because that was, you know, I'm making the connection to October, but there are so many cults and fascinating and brutal and crazy stories out there that I can't believe, like, we have never heard of before, and that, like, weren't making big headlines. And granted, this happened in, you know, another country, but at the same time, I'm just like, why? Like, how do I not know about this? As invested in crime and in like the cult world in general as I am, I was just surprised, because that's wild. I don't know if this is controversial. I'm just curious about it, about your answer.
How do you feel about these shows, say, like Dahmer, where we're giving, you know, this serial killer a platform of 10 episodes? How do you, I mean, did you watch it? Did you,
I did watch it. And so,
I mean, I did too, absolutely.
It is controversial, and like that is the thing I get asked the most, because everyone is talking about Dahmer right now, and everybody, of course, is asking me if I've watched it, because they know my interests in true crime, and they're like, oh, I bet you're watching Dahmer. And I said, yeah, I watched it all the way through. And then it's immediately like, do you think these shows should continue to be made? And to be honest, I'm very split on it, because to me, I didn't think it was glorifying Dahmer. I thought it was showing like who he was truly as a person. I think it was making him look even more disgusting than we knew. Like, I don't think I know that it was showing his troubled family life, and so that's what people are mad about. They're like, they're getting us to sympathize with him, like he had a hard life. But no, I think he had a life that like many people have lived, being from broken families, and they still go on to be normal. So I still think the monstrosity that he became is not defendable, and I didn't get sympathy at all from the show. I didn't either. I did not think he was glorified. I know Evan Peters looked super hot in the show, and that's another thing people are mad about. They're like, look at his body. They're sexualizing him. But also, Dahmer was very sexy. Invested in working out in his physique. Yeah.
Yeah, like you can say someone's sexy and also hate their guts. Like, totally. That was something that was so interesting about him. Is he's charismatic, but not in the way that he talked, just in the way that he was. But it doesn't mean he's a good person or we're glorifying it all. And I think that the true cornerstone of that show is Niecy Nash. And her,
oh my god!
I mean, I have goosebumps right now. Again, she's
racial discussion of the show I thought was amazing, and that was a side of the story that I hadn't heard.
Yeah. Absolutely. And not just that, though. She was this, like, kind of conduit to the victims. And I felt that, like, without her, it would have been glorifying. But with her, we had this really base understanding of the horrific things that he's doing and how it affected people's lives. And I don't want to spoil anything, but there is a, I think most people know that he's not alive now. In his death, I think they did a phenomenal job editing it because you don't have sympathy for him. And it's brutal, but you don't, and I think that's what's more important. And I think, I don't think we're glorifying him in it. I think, sure, there are things that were taken with liberty, because sex sells and horror sells and stuff like that.
You have to dramatize things and do what you have to do. But no, I don't think he was glorified at all.
Right. And I think also them showing the victims at the end, making that the prominence, making sure that the after it's done, any of the text that comes on is not about Dahmer. It is not about his family. It is about the victims, and that's what it should be about. So I think that it's always, if it's done in good taste, and it's always going to be an opinion, whether it's mine or someone else's, like if they're going to like it or not. But I do like these series, obviously, because it tickles my true crime funny bone, but like at the same funny bone, no, it tickles my need. I don't know.
I know, I know what you mean.
But it also is enlightening us on an era of something that happened that we might not know the full facts about,
Yeah, that's why I liked it, is I just always knew Dahmer as this man who was out at the gay bars, taking men home, killing them, and then eating them, having cannibalistic ways. So it was like he was the first cannibalistic serial killer I'd heard about. So I just sort of thought, oh man, that is true evil. I'd never heard of anything like that. But then learning the story that oh no, he lived in this certain neighborhood on purpose because he knew police were not going to be patrolling the area as much. They weren't going to give a shit. No one was going to be missing these people, that he was targeting a specific neighborhood, a specific income
group of people. Yeah.
A very specific group of people than it turned out to be. It was sort of I didn't know any of that. And knowing that so many neighbors called the police and tried to tell on him and the police didn't care. I didn't know of all of, I knew a little bit of that, but I didn't know how deep it went. And then that's the other thing is Niecy Nash was incredible. And whatever, I know some of those conversations were made up for TV because they happened between, someone who is dead now and will never know the truth. But knowing that her character was a real person and that these were all real people who were involved in trying to take this man down. And then seeing the moment where people got to talk to him in court, those were all also real people. And I I found real footage of those people online getting to scream at him in court and tell him how much he broke their family. It was as hard as it was to watch, it's a very hard watch. I get why some people had to stop it after the first episode. It's dark, it's sad, it's disturbing, but I like that they made it so gritty and real because that is the truth of Dahmer. And I don't think it was glorified in any way because it was showing how horrific it was, and it was trying to honor the victims and the families and the people that fought for justice. And also
showing that he was not insane. He did it all out of his own volition. He knew what he was doing, and that is very important. That's an important aspect.
Again, that's another part, the investigation, when they're talking to him at the end, when, he's been caught and he's in jail, and they're like, we can do a plea of insanity. There are ways around this. And he's like,
no,
but I'm not. I know what I did.
But also, didn't it make you so mad when you started to see the popularity it was gaining? And then I'm like, well, we've heard of this though, and I just don't get why people we're obsessed with, say, true crime or serial killers or whatever in a healthy way. When you start to glorify them as stars, that's when you're like, what is happening with our society?
That's when they take it too far. Yeah.
Real people have been killed. Real families are affected. This is not a film, type of thing. That it's so interesting. It's so... Yeah,
because I've seen girls who wear t-shirts I can't even think of what the quote is now. It's some dumb quote, I'm gonna... I have an appetite like Dahmer and something Bundy. And when I see that where I'm oh, you are sexualizing them and you are putting them on a pedestal, I have a problem with that. And there is such a line. I am interested in the stories. I'm interested in the investigations. I'm interested in the victims' families. That's why I love the DNA Doe project. I love the solving the crimes and getting justice and just watching the twists and turns of these stories. But yeah, I feel Ashley and I have to make that a point anytime we do a true crime episode, is we are never trying to glorify these people. And anytime we're like giggling and having fun with these episodes, like you and I obviously have had our moments, it's just because we're talking about something so dark and horrible that
we gotta
all you
throw
can
it in
do
there.
sometimes is laugh and try to make light of it. But we are never, ever trying to make the situation seem like we don't care about it and that there weren't true lives at stake. Like that is not where the interest comes from. And there is a line and there is a boundary, but
and like you said earlier, is like it's you know, kind of in this vein, is that like it's almost too easy to forget that it's another person on the end when we see them so frequently and we're just reading it through a screen. We forget that like real people were affected. And I think that's something that's really a big takeaway, is that in the end, like, just, you know, it's got to be for the victims, it's got to be for the families, and we're researching, hopefully, in the means of trying to understand how this cannot happen again.
Right.
Yeah.
Ugh. Anyway, watch Connor, I guess, if you guys have any interest. Man, I'm like, I don't even know how much I'll edit out of that, because I'm like, it's a good discussion, but also I'm like,
I know, right?
Really,
heavy. Yeah.
We went in hard.
We did, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing about that fascinating cult. I didn't know anything about Black Jesus.
I know. I didn't know anything either about the Hand of Death. Like, that's fascinating, too. But I did know about Orange Socks Girl, so that's just really wonderful.
That they were even
in 2019,
connected.
They were able to, but that they were able to find her, Deborah, and Yeah, I'm glad she was able to be identified, and also, like, it was just an interesting connection that I didn't know about as well. But yeah, I think I saw, or Ashley told me, that there is a documentary out about Hand of Death, but that it's not necessarily popular. And so I'm like, well, I'm going to go watch whatever that is immediately, and I need to figure that out. But I was like, I want to learn everything about it now. But I feel like our new cult series is just going to have to be covering these under the radar ones that somehow we knew nothing about, because this is crazy. I know. Well, during this investigation, I love that I called it that. I found like almost like a forefather of cults, but so many people have been influenced by him. Yeah, but the thing that's the craziest thing is that, like, I don't know that he was actually out to do a cult. I think he might have authentically tried to create a new religion, but people just adapted from him. So I would love to talk about him. I'm not going to say the name, because I'm like leaving that for like, we better have Tyler back on.
Keep it as a surprise.
Keep it as a surprise.
That just means you're going to be back. I was about to say, maybe we'll just have you back later this year, but it's already freaking October.
My God.
Like, you're going to have to come in next season, which is already crazy to say. I feel like we just started, but anyway.
I know, right? Yeah, I mean, I feel like that was gorgeous.
That was for you.
Thank you. And I actually knew that already. You didn't have to say.
No. I'm glad you felt that in your soul.
Deep in my soul.
Thank you so much for coming on. We love having you anytime, and you were just the best fill-in co-host, as much as I miss my girl Ashley. This was so great.
Thank you. I miss Ashley too.
I know. It's her wedding weekend. That is why she's not here. Yeah.
That's right. Well, I'm happy
wedding
to
weekend.
Fill in. Happy wedding weekend, Ashley. Marrying the hottest voice ever.
Handsome Joe.
Handsome Joe.
That angry
Not even
man
angry,
from
just
the
what
East Coast
I called it
passionate.
Buttery burnt toast, because it's like he's got that kind of rasp to it, but it's so smooth. Yeah, he slapped some butter on that burnt toast.
We love it. We love it. That is all the time we have this week for Keep It Weird. Thank you again to Tyler for coming on and talking cults with us, and just for being the best. And part of our Halloween series, the best month of the year. And
I know, I'm just like sound effects over here.
I'm like, keep adding it. Keep adding
it.
And thank you so much, listeners, for tuning in each week and sticking with us, especially during this spooky month of October. And don't miss next week's big Halloween season finale, as we are bringing you fan favorite and our favorite type of episode, Listener Ghost Stories.
Oh, yeah, I love those episodes.
I know. It's just the best way to wrap up October. And it is not a season finale, just a Halloween finale, just to specify. Don't anybody get worried. We still have
I did.
I was worried. I was stressed. Make sure you are following us for the rest of the month on Instagram and Facebook, where we have been posting a bunch of content, but mostly we are posting daily horror movies that you should be checking out and watching, but also you should be engaging with those posts regardless, because it is all part of our Halloween Keep It Weird contest. Just for liking and commenting on our posts all month long, you are entered into our Halloween competition, and the more you engage, the more times your name gets thrown into the hat. So we see you out there, we see who's playing, just chat it up with us on social media, and it could make you a winner. You can also get extra points if you become a member of our Patreon page. Patreon.com/keepitweirdpodcast is where you will find us, and that's where all of our fun bonus content is. And even if you just join for the month of October and send us $1, that counts. So come play the game for your chance to win. You could possibly win a Zoom party with Ashley and myself, which we did back in 2020. And it was so much fun.
I'm going to say, that sounds already fun. That sounds fun. I would do that. I want that.
It was so fun. We all had cocktails. We were all just chatting about life. It was like supposed to be an hour, and I think it was like 2.5 hours. It was so much fun. But
that's incredible.
You can win that, but we also wanted to put it out there that if you hate talking to people on Zoom, because we realize that could be somebody's nightmare, hey, we have anxiety, we totally get it. Other prizes include a signed copy of The Feminine Macabre from our sweet author, Ashley, or free merch goodies of your choosing. Really, the prize can be whatever you want. They're legit, and we can talk it out if you are one of our lucky winners. Also, as much as we would love for you to give even for 1 month on the Patreon to be part of our contest, we would also love if you subscribed and stayed with us on the Patreon, because we do have amazing bonus content each month. We have 2 bonus episodes and a newsletter and discounts on merch for all of our loyal patrons, and we have some fun spooky stuff coming out this month that you don't want to miss out on. So, besides consuming all of our content across every platform possible, you're more than welcome to check our merch anytime at keepitweirdpodcast.com/merch to find shirts, hoodies, tote bags, and all kinds of weirdo goodies. We love when you rep us out in the wild, and all of the products are comfy, cozy, cool. I bring that tote bag everywhere. It is so sturdy. The sweatshirt is the comfiest thing I've ever put on. Go check it out.
3 C's, the triple C's.
Comfy, cozy, cool.
Yeah,
that's right.
Girl.
And Tyler, what is our sign-off this week?
Oh, our sign-off is, I always should know, get your cats and dogs spayed and neutered.
Oh, my God. Are you Bob Barker? What's happening?
It was the first
thing that came to me. The price is right, baby.
It's the first thing that came to me. But it's a good lesson, Let's protect our animals, our animal
That's what
friends.
that's what we're going with. Get your cats and dogs spayed and neutered.
I don't know. Wait, should I say that?
Hey, you know what? I mean, it is a good message, but I just want you to feel
like it was solid. Yeah, it's funny that this always happens where I have no idea what to say at the end.
I know.
No, we'll keep it that, a little Bob Barker memory.
I like it. Bob Barker, get your cats and dogs spayed or neutered and keep it weird. Weird. Yeah, you need that chunky pumpkin. Gotta get that.
There you go. Get the chunk.